Hello, welcome to Atheist Torah Study. My name is Emma Lugo, and I am um, on a journey, a 4 year, a two year journey now to study the Torah from the perspective of an atheist Jew. I started this exploration 2 years ago, and then I got partway through it, and then I had to stop because I just fell so far behind. And then I picked it up again last year, right where I left off in the cycle. And now I'm actually, I think, going to make it all the way because I think there's like six parshas left. So we've got four more parshas before the high holidays. And then there's one parsha in between the high holidays, Hazinu. And then there's one at the very end of the high holidays, right before Shmini Aretz. And that's you read that one for what is that? For Simchat Torah, when you read the very last parsha of the Torah, then you read the very first parsha, you read Bereshit, and so for Simchat Torah. So it looks like I'm going to actually make it through this year, which is really amazing, and I'm really excited by this. I'm recording this on my front porch of my house. So today is Parsha Shoftim, which stands for judges. It means judges. And let's see, a few statistics about this Parsha. It is Deuteronomy chapter 16 to 21. And let's see, it includes the themes of judges and justice, idolatry and the death penalty, central religious authority, kings, the Levites and priests, prophets, cities of refuge, warfare, and unsolved murder. Um, for me, probably the part of the portion that I find the most appealing, that I actually really appreciate, is Tzedek, Tzedek, Tirdof, justice, justice, shall you pursue, which is Deuteronomy 16:20. It comes literally at the very beginning of the Parsha. So I've been reviewing the Parsha again for this week, but I think I'm going to do something a little bit different this time. I think what I'm going to do this time is I'm going to do a read of the Parsha, and I'm just going to comment on it as I'm going through it. So I'm going to just kind of start at the beginning, and I'm just going to do a straight commentary of the Parsha all the way through. And it's a little different from how I've done it because I usually tend to ramble and kind of do a lot of I tend to do a lot of ancillary or discussions that I find are related. But what I think I'm going to do this time is a little bit more classic in terms of how Torah commentary goes. I'm just going to go through it verse by verse and pasuk, and I'm going to just respond to things that I find really interesting in each verse. And this is again from the perspective of an atheist. So, and I'll do as much as I can get through in an hour. So here goes, Parsha Shoftim, verse 18. You shall appoint magistrates and officials for your tribes and all the settlements that the Eternal your God has given you. They shall govern the people with due justice. So Shoftim is divided into, it's kind of concerned with how you legislate a society. And it's written, of course, in my opinion, it's written from the perspective of the Hasmonean um, priests of the second century. And so, in my opinion, they're writing these laws in in the voice of a historical character, Moses, in order to kind of explain the laws that they're actually setting forth for their own society. So, this again goes back to my own theory that the Torah was a document designed to support a religious nationalist framework, and it was intended as a comprehensive document that was meant to address all areas of life. But it has some really interesting clues in this portion that kind of tell you who's writing and who it's really intended for, and we'll kind of get to those as we're going through this. But again, here's the first part. You shall appoint magistrates and officials for your tribes and all the settlements that the eternal your God is giving you, and they shall govern people with due justice. So, I mean, one of the things this makes me think, since it was probably written around the time that the redactors put this into a comprehensive final document, since we don't have a lot of evidence of documents really before the 3rd century BCE. I mean, not to say that there weren't documents before then, but if they were, they weren't widely circulated. They were only like circulated within a very small niche group of people. Either that or else the documents kind of were redacted and compiled in the 3rd century, which is I mean, I think they probably come from much older sources. Um, but I think that the Torah itself as a document was probably oh, constructed around this time. So, I mean, one of the questions that it makes me ask is, were there tribes, quote unquote tribes, in the 3rd century BCE in Israel? Were there tribes, or was the tribe simply a way of trying to understand um, and a much older, and it was a tribe a way of trying to understand uh, like mythic origins, basically? I mean, I would say that considering everything else in the document, that it probably refers to some kind of mythical origins. But I mean, I'm totally bullshitting those. Like, I don't know what's true. This is all just pure speculation on my part. But I would say, given the language in the Torah, um, this is all kind of uh, this is all a mythological text, anyways. It's a mythological construction of the past, which is meant to reinforce what at the time was kind of a real world power. So um, it's basically saying that the people are going to be getting this country, which is the country they actually live in at the time this document is written, but it's written in a mythical past, you know, so that the people, it's meant to give the people who read it a sense that they come from some kind of, grand historical origin. It's a foundational narrative, anyways. But it has some really good, this particular parsha has some really, really good one-liners in it. And then it has some absolutely terrible, horrifying one-liners and whole sections, which maybe we'll get to. Anyways, verse 19. You shall not judge unfairly. You shall not know partiality. You shall not take a bribe, for bribes blind the eyes of the discerning and upset the plea of the just. So that's really cool. That's a great line. It's a great one line. And it has like, what does it have? It has five, it has three separate commandments in it, and then kind of an explanation. It says, you shall not judge unfairly. You shall not show partiality. You shall not take bribes, for bribes blind the eyes of the discerning and upset the plea of the just. That's all true, and that is great. This is like some of the best stuff in the Torah. And actually, the next line I think is really like the pinnacle of the Torah. Justice, justice shall you pursue, that you may thrive and occupy the land that the eternal your God has given. So, again, the people. So, like, don't worry about the people taking the land. They already live there. Now, in 1948, they took the land where somebody else lived. But when this story is redacted, the people who live there basically are living in their own. But that doesn't even matter. I mean, what matters is the very first part of it. Justice, justice shall you pursue. I mean, it really speaks to me what is really kind of the best about Jewish tradition. It's basically this idea that justice is foundational to what it means to be Jewish. It's absolutely foundational, and it's a really beautiful it's a really beautiful thought to think that what you should be most concerned with. Oh, and so one of the commentaries I read said that so what this means is it means that you can't just pursue justice. The reason that, well, there's a lot of ways in which the fact that justice is explained twice is explained, but one of them is that you need to pursue justice and you need to pursue justice in a just way, which I mean is my objection to the genocide in Gaza, because the genocide in Gaza was the pursuit of justice in an unjust way. I mean, the fact that 1,200 people were murdered on October 7th was a terrible thing, but the pursuit of justice for their murders was not just. It was, in fact, genocidal, and it so far outweighed anything that was ever done that it just completely perverted. It really just made the deaths of those people, those 1,200 people who were murdered, it 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 just did so much to dishonor them and their memories. I mean, the actions that were taken by the Israeli government, which have resulted in the deaths of tens of thousands of people. It was not justice. And the story here, even though, like, again, this is just a story, but the story here is that if you don't pursue justice in a just fashion, then the land is going to vomit you out. It doesn't say that right there, but that's the implication, is that when you're within the land, you must be just. And I think that, that's, as an atheist, I think that's a great goal. That should always be a goal for everyone. We should always try to be as ethical and as just as we possibly can be. Okay, verse 21. You shall not set up a sacred post, any kind of a pole, beside the altar of the eternal your God that you may make. So, as an atheist, I mean, it seems kind of weird. Like, there's poles all around me. I mean, there's telephone poles and there's poles holding up the roof, and uh, there's trees that look like poles, and there's street signs. So there's a lot of posts, although none of them, I guess, are sacred. But this is what they're really saying is that you can't put up things that are symbols of the goddess and of the goddess culture, because as we've explained in previous episodes of Atheist Torah Study, um, the Hasmoneans just had a particular fondness for like trying to just completely erase the goddess within Jewish tradition. So, in my opinion, that's what this is about. But as an atheist, I mean, well, I mean, I'm just going to go back to the text for a minute, because in the text, it literally says in Bereshit, which we're going to get to again in a few weeks, that there were different places in Genesis and Bereshit where some of the characters like erected a pole, erected a monument for God. If they had a religious experience, then they would erect a pillar. a pillar is not the same thing as a post, but it's pretty similar. Oh no, and then the next line, verse 22, or erect a stone pillar, for such the eternal your God detests. And it's like, in Bereshit, in Genesis, the very characters that are like the founders of the religion are actually erecting stone pillars to God. So it's like the Torah totally contradicts itself here. And the redactors, I think the redactors just didn't cross check their story, or, they weren't concerned with being logically consistent. Okay, verse 17. You shall not sacrifice to the eternal your God an ox or a sheep that has any defect of a serious kind, for that is abhorrent to the eternal your God. So I seriously doubt that even 2,300 years ago that anybody, I mean, I wonder what kind of a God people thought this was, a God that was demanding that people sacrifice their animals. I mean, since there wasn't any God at the time either, they must have understood that this was symbolic because they never saw God eating the animals. It's really hard to make sense of animal sacrifice. I mean, it's a culture that's so far removed from any understanding that I have of reality that I really can't get into the mind of these people. I mean, I can speculate, and you can. So the way that this is understood in Jewish tradition is that you're supposed to bring your best when you're reflecting the tradition and the God of the tradition. You're supposed to bring your best. So like for when I do these, I should be dressed up and I should have good sound and I should be prepared for what I'm going to talk about. And it should be, it's, I think that's kind of the idea. But, I mean, from my perspective as an atheist, I think, well, first of all, it's incredibly cruel to sacrifice an animal just for an invisible deity that you can't even see. One of the things, and I'm not sure how many of these animals actually were sacrificed, but what I remember hearing is that at some point you just bought a token with a picture of the animal on it, and then you gave that token to the priest. So, anyways, let's keep on going. If there is found among you in one of the settlements that the Eternal, your God, is giving you, a man or a woman who has affronted the Eternal, your God, and transgressed the covenant, turning, turning to the worship of other gods, and bowing down to them, to the sun or the moon, or any of the heavenly host, something I never commanded. So, if they're worshiping another god, if they're bowing down to the sun or the moon, these all sound really like things you should do. I mean, I've never thought about bowing down to the sun or bowing down to the moon, but I mean, it's kind of interesting because the text seems to acknowledge that like worshiping the sun and worshiping the moon are actually some of the oldest forms of religious worship. And they're actually, in a lot of ways, I think, the foundation of religious practice. I mean, I think that for for thousands of years, people have worshipped, stood in awe, been absolutely fascinated by the sun and the moon. But it this kind of leads on the slippery slope toward atheism, because when you try so hard to censor other religious traditions that are doing the same thing that your religious tradition is doing. I mean, since there isn't any God in any of these traditions, they're all just going about the business of God in different ways. And the business of God is transaction. It's the transaction between the priests and the people. And it's transactional in that it's it's also like I said before in a previous episode, it's kind of a shortcut to an altered reality. I mean, if you're connected with a religion, you are experiencing kind of dualism. And so you always think there's this other reality besides the reality that you're experiencing. And that reality is just as important as the one that you're in right now. And that's kind of the dualism. Anyways, verse 4. And you have been informed or have learned of it, then you shall make a thorough inquiry. If it is true, the fact established, that abhorrent thing was perpetuated in Israel. So I guess it's really important this is in Israel. You shall take the man or the woman who did that wicked thing out to the public place, and you shall stone them, that man or woman, to death. A person shall be put to death only on the testimony of two or more witnesses, and no one shall be put to death on the testimony of a single witness. So that's a good law, you know. Well, not really. I guess it's not a good law. It, I don't know. There isn't really. It's it's hard to redeem the text. It's just it's hard to redeem the text. I mean, it's important to remember this is written during the classical Hellenistic age, and it's in the this is in the Levant, and these people had their own rituals and rules for what they consider to be a just society. So, but there's actually a lot of problems with this. So one of the problems is that it's very easy for two people to collaborate and to make up a story. That's really easy to do. And it doesn't, I mean, in a modern court, well, I mean, I guess there are places in which that would constitute evidence, which is kind of unfortunate. Um, especially when you're talking about putting someone to death. I mean, why on earth would you put someone to death anyways? Well, here you're putting them to death basically for blasphemy, which is just so unfortunate. I mean, one of the first things that the God tells the people to do in the text is to um, put people to death who are just basically participating in a different religious tradition from your own. So that's just really a problem. Anyways, okay, let's read the next verse. Verse 7. Let the hand of the witnesses be first to put the condemned to death, followed by the hands of the rest of the people. Thus you will sweep out evil from your midst. So it's basically saying that in addition to having two witnesses, the witnesses will be the first people to stone somebody to death. And that's supposed to be a reinforcement on like the justice of the act. Now, I can tell you that as a transgender person, there's a whole segment of society that wouldn't have any problems lying and then also being the ones to throw the first stones to stone some transgender person to death. I mean, It's just, you, history, they may not have had a very good recorded history at this time. But now in the 21st century, we have a great recorded history. And so we kind of know what would actually happen if this was how things were done. I mean, minorities would be persecuted as they already are by our society, and they would be put to death as they already are by our society. And it really isn't just, and it's really, and that's kind of what our justice system looks like. And it's what this would be all a real problem if it were actually practiced. Okay, verse 8. Now I've never read this verse before, or I've read it, but I can't remember. If a case is too baffling for you to decide, be it a controversy over homicide, civil law, or assault, matters of dispute in your courts, you shall promptly repair to the place that the eternal your God will have chosen, and appear before them, the Levitical priest or the magistrate in charge at the time, and present your problem. When they have announced to you the verdict in the case, you shall carry out the verdict that is announced to you from that place that God chose, observing scrupulously all their instructions. So, like that. So, that very first part we just talked about a minute ago, that's what we would call, it's not quite vigilante justice, but it's pretty close. And then this next part is supposed to be more like some kind of court slash justice process. And so it's like an official, it's a Levitical priest. So that's actually a lot of power to have in the society. And the instructions are that once a judgment has been made, then you have to carry it out right away. And you have to do exactly what the judgment says. And then it says, should the losing party act presumptuously and disregard the priest charged with serving the eternal your God, or the magistrate, that person shall die. Thus you will sweep out evil from Israel. So that's basically what it's saying. Oh, oh, I mean, it's every society has its own different ways of trying to delegate justice, and this is another way of doing that. That's basically what this is. So, hang on just a minute. Hey, lad, just a minute. Hey, I'm back. All right. Let's see. We were just talking about the judges. Verse 14. This is Deuteronomy 17. If after you have entered the land that the eternal your God has assigned to you, and taken possession of it and settled in it, you decide, I will set a king over me, as do all the nations about me. Now, this part is just so funny because it's like, this is one of those just really small parts, like where the text kind of really it tells you exactly where it is in history, and it tells you exactly where it is in time. So again, this is the writers, they're writing from the perspective of a mythological past. but they're actually using it to describe their exact time in their moment. And so I don't know if they had a king or not during the Hasmonean era. I really, as I've said before, I'm just a big speculator. This is all just a big speculation for me. But my understanding is that there were kings during the Hasmonean era. There was about 200 years of kind of a semi-independent rule for Israel, and that during that time there were kings. And so part of what the text is doing right here is it's kind of telling you that there's a king, and it's trying to give some kind of historical justification for there being a king. Let's see. The next line is, "You shall be free to set a king over yourself, one chosen by the eternal your God. Be sure to set as king over yourself one of your own people. You must not set a foreigner over you, one who is not your fellow Israel." So, one of the things it does here that's really classic for like the entire ancient Near Middle East, going all the way back, to 6000 BCE, is that the king is an eternal person chosen by God. And that's just like that goes all the way back. I mean, and it goes all the way into the future too. There's the idea of the divine right of kings. So this is not at all a new idea. I mean, it's one of the oldest idea. It's one of the oldest scams in the ancient world and in the modern world and in the pre-modern world. The idea that if somebody's a king, so if they have absolute authority, then they must have been chosen by God. And again, it's just one of the biggest scams in history. Moreover, he shall, and then this is the next line. This one's really specific. So obviously, uh, either there, e- either there was a king who, uh, either there was a king who, uh, well, let me just read it. Okay, verse 16. Moreover, he shall not keep many horses, or send people back to Egypt to add to his horses. Since God has warned you, you must not go back that way again. You've got to wonder about this verse. I'm sure somebody's written about this. I mean, I guess I could look it up. There must be some scholarly article on this, like just trying to figure out what in the heck is this talking about? It's like I, I mean, so the way that it's understood in the tradition is that a good king should not be concerned with having a lot of luxurious items. Like the king should be kind of, and the Hasmoneans are telling you a lot about themselves here. They're telling you that they're, at least in their mind, they're thrifty. They're really concerned. It's really clear that the Hasmoneans are really concerned about their community, and they're really concerned about the boundaries of their community, and they're concerned about how things appear, the appearance of things, and they're also concerned about justice. The Hasmoneans are concerned about justice, and lots of good things here. And right here, I mean it's a value I share too. That I try not to have too many things, and I try not to waste resources, and that's basically the way this is generally understood. But this specific set of instructions that the king shall not keep many horses is just uh, a strange set of instructions. But obviously it meant something. Maybe there were kings at the time who had a lot of horses. I don't know. I mean, a lot of the things that you see in the Torah are supposed to be about how Jews or how the people in this story um distinguish themselves from the people around them. So our king shouldn't have many horses. And then it also says, or send people back to Egypt to add to his horses. So that part's a little hard to understand. I, I mean, does it mean that he's sending people back to Egypt to trade for horses, or is he sending people back to Egypt to get horses? Is there some kind of a horse market in Egypt? And then, of course, this is all being commanded by God, which is, this is just one of those weird lines in the Torah. Like the Torah actually has a lot of lines like this. I mean, it actually makes up a lot of the Torah, just these really strange bits of text that are kind of hard to understand. And then the next line, verse 17, he shall not have many wives, lest his heart go astray, nor shall he amass silver and gold to excess. So, I mean, the first thing I would ask myself is, why would he have many wives? Why doesn't he have just, one wife? I mean, just because he's a king, why does he need to have many wives? I mean, I think that the understanding is that at that time, it was pretty common for a king to have many wives. At least that seems to be the implication. But here the implication is he's not to have too many wives, but it's just, it's so patriarchal. It's just patriarchal beyond belief. But besides the patriarchal part of it, about a king having a bunch of wives, it's an interesting statement about the morality of this culture. I mean, they really didn't have a problem with polygamy, you know. I mean, I think the issue here was that polygamy was acceptable as long as you could afford to do it. And because, we see polygamy in several parts of the Torah. And here it's it's a rule about polygamy, but only for one person, only for the king. It doesn't mention anyone else. And then here's more about the king. When he is seated on his royal throne, he shall have a copy of this teaching written for him on a scroll by the Levitical priest. So this line specifically really tells you, this whole section really tells you exactly where the Torah is written and when it's written and who it's written for. I mean, this line really tells you that this text is written for the king. Like the whole Torah is really written for the king in the Hasmonean era, and it's meant to be distributed to the general public to be read. Of course, there's an understanding at the time that most of the general public is illiterate, so they're just supposed to listen. But the king is supposed to be, intelligent enough that he can read it. And then there's actually more to it. And then the next line, verse 19, is let it remain with him and let him read it all his life, so that he may learn to revere the eternal, his God, and to observe faithfully every word of his teaching, as well as these laws. Thus he will not act haughtily towards his fellows, or deviate from the instructions of the right or the left, and that he and his descendants may reign long in the midst of Israel. So that's kind of the Hasmoneans looking to the future. So the part that I was expecting to be there wasn't. So I'm going to go back to verse 18 for a minute and just comment on it really quickly. Uh, When he is seated on his royal throne, he shall have a copy of this teaching written for him on a scroll by the Levitical priests. Now, my understanding of these mitzvot is that the king himself is actually supposed to write the Torah scroll. So that was my understanding of the mitzvot, even though the language here doesn't say that at all. The language here says that he'll have a copy of the Torah written for him by a priest, which I guess is another way to do it. Anyways, let's just move on. Chapter 18. The Levitical priests, the whole tribe of Levi, shall have no territorial portion with Israel. They shall live only off God's offerings by fire as their fire portion. They shall have no portion among their brothers' tribes. God is their portion, as promised. So it's basically just saying that the Levites can't inherit any land. This, when then, shall be the priest's due from the people. Everyone who offers a sacrifice, whether an ox or sheep, must give the shoulder blade, the cheeks, and the stomach to the priests. Okay. You shall also give him the first fruits of your new grain and the first shearing of your sheep. For the eternal your God has chosen him and his descendants out of all your tribes to be in attendance for service in the name of the God of all time. So it's also telling you the priorities of the priestly class, the parts of the food that they can get, and then who's gonna, I guess this will be the next section, who's gonna gather up the first fruits. And there's a set of instructions. Okay. Verse 5. For the eternal your God has chosen him and his descendants out of all tribes to be in attendance for the service in the name of God for all time. If a Levite would go from any of the settlements throughout Israel where he's been residing to the place that God has chosen, he may do so whenever he pleases. Okay, so he has freedom of movement, within a Jewish state, he has freedom of movement, which is more than a Palestinian has. All right. He may serve in the name of the eternal his God, like all his fellow Levites who are there in attendance before you. They shall receive equal shares of the dues without regard to personal gifts or patronage. So this whole section we just read is like a section about the priests. And again, it tells you the concerns of the redactors. The redactors seem to be really interested in the king. The language says that the redactors aren't as close to the king as they are to the Levitical class. The Levitical class, they're willing to go on for quite a bit about, because they're kind of letting you know where they're from. And then, anyways, let's read some more. When you enter the land that the eternal your God is giving you, you should not learn to imitate the abhorrent practices of those nations. So here's again one that's about really separating out one group from the other group. And it's kind of trash talking of like another culture and their religion is just so common throughout the ancient Near East. So it's kind of comical, but it gets really good really fast. This whole section is about the occult and about magic. So here goes. Let no one be found among you who consigns a son or daughter to the fire, or who is an augur, a soothsayer, a diviner, a sorcerer. Oh, this is great stuff. One who casts spells, one who consults ghosts, one who inquires of the dead. For anyone who does such things is abhorrent to God, and it is because of those abhorrent things that the eternal, your God, is dispossessing them. For you must be wholehearted with the eternal. Okay. I mean, is there any need to comment on this at all? Isn't it? It's okay, but it's still, this is good stuff. Okay, let's go back. So, an augur, a soothsayer, a diviner, a sorcerer. So these are all job titles in the in the near Middle East. These are all job titles. Um, one who casts spells, there's another occupation. One who consults ghosts or familiar spirits. Um, and one who inquires of the dead. So, anyways, I don't think I need to comment more on that. It's pretty self-explanatory. Those nations, this is verse I'm getting tired. I think I'm probably just gonna wrap it up. Yeah, I think I'm gonna wrap it up because I'm starting to drift. So well, let me just try to get to the very end of this, if I can. You must be wholehearted with the eternal your God. Those nations you're about to dispossess do indeed resort to soothsayers and augurs. To you, however, the eternal your God has not assigned them. So it's back to it's okay for them to do it, but you can't do it. From among your own people, the eternal your God will raise up for you a prophet like myself, whom you shall heed. So it's trying to explain the idea of divine leadership, which of course is bullshit. Anyways, this is just what you asked of the eternal your God at Horeb on the day of the assembly, saying, let me not hear the voice of the eternal my God any longer, or see this wondrous fire anymore, lest I die. So this is referring back to another part of the Torah where the people see God in fire. Whereupon God said to me, they have done well. Okay. And then the next part is about raising up a prophet. So I think that's all I'm going to get to tonight. This was so basically what I tried to do is I tried to comment on each verse as I went by it, especially if there was something good to comment on. And I think I'll probably do the rest of Devarim this way. There's only four more like really main chapters and four more really main parshas in Devarim, and then the last two are during the high holidays. So thank you so much today for joining me, and we'll see you next week.